Chia, chia. Greetings, beautiful people. I hope that you are doing as well as possible amidst it all. My name is Colin Masashi Rohahio Ehara, and this is The Paper Plane. The Paper Plane is a podcast created and hosted by myself, where I interview people I am blessed and honored to share community with, asking them about a book or books that have had a transformative impact on their lives. And in a society where literacy rates are steadily declining, our attention spans and critical consciousness are under attack, and a growing number of podcasts hosted by cishet men consciously or unconsciously champion expressions of masculinity that come at the expense of women, femmes, female-bodied folks, LGBTQIA, Two-Spirit Plus, especially BIPOC people. This space imperfectly aims to operate as a counter-narrative to those things. The paper plane is a space that intends to highlight the dire importance of relationships, community, dialogue, perpetual learning, honest expression as art, art as honest expression, freedom for literacy, and of course, literacy for freedom. It speaks to planes of existence attached to the act of reading, but also as a metaphor for the flights we take as we sit in what Ta-Nehisi Coates calls a one-way interface as readers, and how these journeys shape us. Today's guest is someone I have known for over 2 decades and has and always will be absolutely beloved to me. She and I met at UC Santa Cruz-Oakes College, Oaks, in 2000. Lord, as freshmen, we were residential advisors our sophomore and junior years, and we became especially close during our senior year when we studied abroad at the University of Ghana-Legon in West Africa in 2004. We have witnessed up close and from afar each other's many victories, mistakes, maturations, battles, joys, growth, healing, and transformations. She is a powerful combination of softness and sensitivity, mixed brilliantly with don't play in my face because I'm not the one type energy, the kind of person I want my daughters to see model humanity, and someone whose love of Bob Marley is rivaled only by her love of her family, be they blood or chosen. I am deeply honored to be amongst the chosen for you. Asena Lilywater Tui'one, JD, she slash her, is a community advocate, policy strategist, and organizer committed to building equity and community power. She serves as director of the Training Institute at the Center for Justice Innovation in New York City, where she leads people-centered programs that foster collaboration, growth, and shared leadership. Raised in a Tongan immigrant household, Asena brings deep care, bold vision, and a justice-driven spirit to every space she enters, from education reform in the Bronx to policy advocacy across New York and California. And it is with that I am so pleased and excited and honored to honor my dear sibling, Asena. Welcome to the Paper Plane. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
So excited that you're here. And y'all, when I tell you this is um one of my chosen family loves in my life, I mean it, and I'm as serious as a heart attack. We are going to talk about a very exciting book. And that book is Inner Engineering, a Yogi's Guide to Joy, which is a 2016 book written by Indian yogi and mystic Sadhguru. The book was featured among the New York Times bestseller in the spirituality self-help category for November 2016. The book is intended to be a spiritual guide with practices for personal growth and also a look at the author's own spiritual journey. The book is divided into two sections. Part one contains 5 chapters: When I Lost My Sense, The Way Out Is In, Design Your Destiny, No Boundary, No Burden, and Now Yoga. Part two has 4 chapters: Body, Mind, Energy, and Joy. And y'all, please note spoilers will abound in this episode. And we will be discussing the following themes as it pertains to this work: personal transformation and justice work, mindfulness and education and training, breaking conditioned identities, emotional resilience in high stress fields, bridging spirituality and social justice, ego power and leadership, and practical application of inner engineering. So, Asena, again, thank you so much for being here. And to kind of open things up, wondering what made you choose this text specifically for us to discuss on the paper plane, and what journeys would you say that this text has taken you on?
Thank you for having me, Colin. I am so thankful for you and our kinship through all these years, and just want to start by thanking you for just always being in community with me, helping me to grow through life, and then just creating community space always, and giving me the opportunity to like reflect on this book in relationship to these themes. And um, it's an honor to be here talking with you. So I love you. I thank you for this opportunity. I picked inner engineering, Colin, because honestly, it just reflects the values that I try to live by:
Mm,
joy, alignment, purpose. And it's just a reminder to actually live those values and not just talk about them. Like joy is something that you need to embody in how you move, how you treat yourself, how you treat your people, how you show up at work, all of those things. And so I was just sharing with you that I listened to this book in the morning time. I listen to it on Audible in the morning times, and it helps me just to slow down, to become present, and brings me back to center. Um, and yeah, and I've come to really believe that systems and relationships around us, they will either support our alignment or pull us out of it.
mm,
So like we need practices that keep us grounded and in good relationship with ourselves. So that this book has become part of that practice for me. And it helps me to just recalibrate, think about the bigger picture, and know that I don't know everything. I can't see the full picture. Um, and it keeps me in alignment and focused. I have a tendency to do too much or to think I have big plans, and so this helps me to recalibrate and uh, fo center on what really matters
mm.
every single day.
I love that. I love that. And I know for those of us, doing change work who have, done leadership in different organizations and things like this, that being able to, find things that help bring us grounding is so, so important, because of the ways that we can get sent out in 17 different directions at once a lot of times.
Yeah.
And when it kind of in the vein of that, to kind of kick things off, right? So with regards to you're already noting kind of pieces around personal transformation and justice work. So Sadhguru emphasizes self-transformation as the foundation for meaningful change. It makes me think of Gloria Anzaldúa, who says, "I change myself, I change the world." How do the principles of inner engineering align with your work in justice reform and pieces around diversity, equity, inclusion, all of these things that are implicitly or explicitly under attack at the moment?
Yes. One thing that really struck me from inner engineering is when Sadhguru, he talks about how real lasting change has to start from within. And in justice work, we're trained to focus on systems, the laws, the policies, and the structures, and all of that matters. But I've seen what happens when folks doing that work, they haven't done their own inner work. So you can like have all the right language, all the right frameworks, but if you're leading from burnout or ego or unprocessed pain, that energy seeps into the space and you just end up recreating the same harm that you're charged with dismantling. And so this book reminds me that how I lead is directly tied to how well I'm tending to my inner state. Like
Mm,
am I just reacting? Am I just performing? Like am I doing too much? And so, like, the more attuned I am to what's going on inside of me and why I'm doing what I'm doing, the more effective and just the more human I am in the work. And I've worked in so many different organizations and know that embedding justice values into like the bones of a system is very, very hard.
mm,
And I'm in a position to do that. And it's like you have to unlearn, you have to create systems that help people to unlearn. And you need people who are interested in that unlearning, right?
mm,
And like developing self-awareness. Um, and so, yeah, for me, justice work is spiritual work. And the spiritual work is really about being in alignment with ourselves, coming back to our center again and again so that we're not leading from pressure or performance, but we're leading from like our community values. And so inner engineering just affirms that for me, like personally and professionally.
really beautifully said. No worries if not, but I'm kind of curious just if there are instances where, you can tell maybe like a specific piece from this book maybe helped, you um in yeah, in terms of, kind of identifying or, kind of moving differently within the work that you do around
Yeah,
you said.
I I think that part of the book, part of how it's retrained my mindset is that we have to let go of control and that like our reaction is based on us focusing on our past or the future, like anxiety about the future or being tied to the past and our past experiences. And so Sadhguru just talks about really leaning in to just deep listening and being present and not letting your past or your fixation on the future be a barrier, right? And so it's like always pushing you to kind of let go. And so like being aware of what triggers me in scenarios and situations and giving that trigger pause because that trigger comes from my fixation on the past or the future
Mm,
or what that person um, represents that is triggering me, right?
yeah.
Uh, and so that when he started to talk about that, like we are enslaving ourselves. And so, like, just freeing your mind to really be present in every situation and not just like associating people with patterns has helped me to make that shift.
That's really, really dope. And as somebody who started therapy this year for anxiety, a lot of that rings really true. I you said something that really stuck with me a moment ago about like the importance of listening. And so I was kind of wondering, in your experience, what role has either your own kind of deep listening to others and or, having others, deeply listen to you, positively, how has that positively impacted, some of the work that you've done,
Oh my goodness.
experience?
It's transformed me. And I think that I started by saying like we need practices to help us stay centered because systems impact us, our relationships impact us, but our past has impacted us. And so my past, like I come from a Pacific Islander background, my parents immigrated here. And so the household was very much like authoritarian, right? And so there wasn't a lot of like emotional language or like identifying with like feelings, like you were supposed to tuck those feelings away, right? So all of those like traditional old school values were present. Um, and so being in spaces where like starting with Santa Cruz, where he went to school, or just learning restorative practice and being a circle keeper. But like all the spaces I've chosen to be in or to school me or help me to grow has helped me to practice deep listening. Like circle practice, you're practicing deep listening. Being in this role, I have to practice deep listening. And that means, and just being a director of training, you're always facilitating. And to facilitate well, you have to be in tune and deeply listen to the group and be flexible. And so I think all of it is stemmed from yeah, just learning, feeling how that those deep listening practices impact me and how it's helped me to embrace people who are different than me, really deeply listening to them, um, has helped me to carry that practice.
Mm, mm. Well, this is kind of a perfect segue into this next question, because my understanding is that there's a number of different kind of practices that are
Yeah.
included within this book, including mindfulness practices. And so, for you as someone who is a veteran educator, director of training folks and supporting folks, I'm wondering how do you see mindfulness practices like those advocated by Sadhguru playing a role in effective teaching, leadership development, and even in your own personal life?
Yeah, no, I see mindfulness as one of the most underrated leadership tools that we have, especially in education and justice work. And so it's like, it's not just personal well-being, but it's like personal, professional survival strategy. So, like in teaching, in training, and facilitating, so much of it comes down to how we show up and not just what we say, and people feel that. And that's what has helped me be successful, a successful teacher and facilitator. Sadhguru talks a lot about alignment, mindfulness as alignment in your body, mind, energy, and spirit.
Mm.
And so, like in the work, it's like taking a deep breath before a meeting, grounding myself before tough conversations. But it's a baseline of presence, so I'm not just reacting to chaos that surrounds me,
Yeah.
but I'm grounded in kind of like just being present and not being reactive. And so, yeah, when I'm grounded, I can hold more as a facilitator. And I have seen myself develop from like working with young people to now the role that I have.
Yeah.
And having those deep mindfulness practices helps me get beyond reacting. And so it helps me to facilitate a space that builds trust, right? And it communicates to people like, I'm here, I'm not trying to control everything. And that opens the door for learning, transformation, all the things that we need. So for me, mindfulness isn't zoning out, but tuning in
Mm.
to what like the room really needs, to the moment. And this it helps to stay in alignment, to talk about what really needs to be talked about and not just like sticking to a script.
I love that. It's making me think of there's this book by journalist Johann Hari called Stolen Focus, and it's essentially about, like social media, like all these different things and how distracted we are and how hard it is for folks to focus because of all these distractions. And a lot of what it sounds like you're naming is strengthening one's ability to like to focus, to be present in the here and the now.
Yes.
And that if and when you're able to do that, that it can create a space where other folks are able to tap into that presence and be there in that moment in the here and now. That also then, from what you were speaking to earlier, kind of takes us to a place where we're not getting pushed and pulled towards anxiety of the future or
Yeah.
potential depression around the past, and really just in the here and now. Um, and I'm thinking about this next piece, right? And so this is, around breaking conditioned identities, how those all tie into everything, right? That we've been
Mm-hmm.
talking about. Because in inner engineering, Sadhguru discusses the need to transcend social conditioning, right? So
Yes.
much of which we're being pushed and pulled in all these different directions at once. And it's and like you spoke to a little bit, right? This can be intergenerational, right? That is social conditioning
Mm-hmm.
that we take on and inherit and learn and unlearn. But given your expertise in leadership, social justice, change work, how can individuals and institutions work towards deconstructing limiting beliefs while still honoring cultural identity, heritage, especially for historically dispossessed communities of color?
I really love this question, Colin. I think that if we're serious about breaking out of conditioned identities, especially in justice work, we've got to start by letting communities lead. And I know that this is stuff we've talked about in the past, and it's like a core value that we share. And that means like actually making space for people to name their own needs, define their own values, and chart their own way forward. Like that's that. And including them in the process, not just in the end, but centering them from the beginning. And that requires letting go of ego, which we've been all socialized against. Like we've been socialized to center our ego. And I think about this a lot when I talk with my partner who's from Burkina Faso. And that country is going through a huge shift right now under their president, Ibrahim Traore.
Mm.
And he's like unapologetically centering the people. Like he's restructuring system to support food sovereignty, nationalizing their resources, giving free tractors to farmers, building a state bank. Like, and it's not about copying an external model, but about honoring who the Burkinabe people are and giving them the tools to live into their own vision of freedom. And
Mm.
that's like so anti what this country stands for. But that's the same kind of energy we need our institutions to lean into, like especially our justice and equity spaces. We can't keep saying that we want transformation while holding on to structures that were never built with us in mind. So if the people most impacted aren't leading, then we're just replicating power, just in different clothes. And Sadhguru, he says, and this stood out to me, he says that if it doesn't bring you closer to freedom, it's unnecessary. And to me, like that, I'm like, I think about that in my personal life, not just professionally, but if it's not helping Asena be more free,
Mm,
why am I investing so much time in that space? And so, yeah, liberatory work is deconstructing what's been imposed upon us while staying rooted in who we are. And so, yeah, building systems that reflect our wholeness and not just survival, survival mode.
mm. That's really, really beautiful. And I'm thinking about, through my lens as an ethnic studies educator, kind of how maybe we grow in all of our abilities to define freedom, right? Because, so much of what, I'm finding in this particular moment in time is like it feels like a growing number of people, I would say poor and working class people in the United States, regardless of color or culture to a certain extent, seem to define freedom or equate freedom as like assimilation into white Anglo-Saxon
Mhm.
Protestant like middle class ways of being and seeing, and or or basically being able to be in a position where they're above somebody else or above someone else in the hierarchy,
Yeah.
whether that's blaming queer and trans folks for society's ills or immigrants, so especially of color, um, yeah, and so. Yeah, I guess like my mind is just kind of thinking about, in, what are the best ways in, just like in our own personal sphere of influences, as
Mhm.
to first, like you said, to begin our conversation, to start, with ourself and like, you know, do I feel free? If not, why not? When do I ever feel free? And like, what does that, how do I define that? And maybe this question of like, does that ever come at somebody else's expense? My feelings of
Mhm.
trying to trouble that a little bit, but
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think about like how partnership or community friendship helps with that freedom. And like being our friendship, like we became really close studying in Ghana and
mhm,
like being students at UC Santa Cruz that has a very particular framework. And it was such like a peak learning time in our lives. And I remember a conversation, Colin, we were having where I was like expressing frustration with whiteness and things of that sort. And you kind of shared with me perspective, like being multiracial. And but our relationship helps with transformation. Like my partnership with um, my partner, Prince, helps with that transformation. Like being in relationship helps helps us to deepen that definition of freedom.
I appreciate that. And also, I was thinking like, I can't remember exactly what our conversation was. My initial thought was like, I might feel completely different now than I did then, right? And like, and how we grow and change over time,
Uh,
you know?
yeah.
Um, yeah, because today, 2025, Colin would be very far away from defending or interrupting any person of color's anger at
Mm,
whiteness or white supremacy.
hmm.
Just to be
Yeah.
thinking about, like our own, our own journeys and just like where we're at one point and like what we're trying to figure out in that moment. And then like, and I'm sure, how long ago was that? Like
That
20
was
years?
on 2000 over, yeah, over
Yeah.
25 years,
Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, in 20 years, I'm sure both of us will have different perspectives on everything we're talking about right now in this moment.
right?
Or, at least to a degree. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Hmm.
And like this is the beginning of May as we're recording this, and generally, a lot of times like I've found April, May can be kind of high stress, particularly as you're like kind of approaching the summer. But I name that only because I wanted to ask you about kind of emotional resilience and high stress fields.
Hmm.
Both of our fields are related and both high stress. Um,
Yeah.
so your work involves addressing systemic injustice and facilitating difficult conversations. So I'm wondering, how might the yogic philosophy of inner stillness help professionals in high stress environments maintain emotional balance, in hopes to avoid burnout?
Yes. This question is spot on. And you know how it is, like working in justice spaces and education means you're constantly in motion. There's always urgency, always something heavy in the room, trauma. There's like underlying issues, there's politics, and then we have that pressure to be on all the time, like perfectionism and the pressure like if we slow down that we're going to fall behind or people are going to think we're all the things that are internalized like if we go slowly it's not good, slow is not good, we got to move fast, especially here on this East Coast. um and so inner engineering for me, and this is really, I've begun to re-listen to this book this year. This is my third year of doing the work as a director of training. But it's just reminding me that inner stillness isn't about checking out, but it's actually what keeps us going. So
Hmm.
it's fuel. So when I'm steady inside, I can hold the hard stuff without it like having me swallow me, and without me like overthinking things. And that's part of the yogic philosophy that really lands with me, is that stillness isn't a retreat from the work, but
Hmm.
it lets us stay in it with integrity. Like
Ooh, I like
we
that.
as leaders, we all have feelings and emotions. Like we're not supposed to be performing leadership, but we're supposed to be um observing.
Yeah.
And that kind of steadiness is yogic practice. So it's mindfulness, it's breath work, it's all of those like getting enough sleep, eating what supports your body. You and I have had conversations about alcohol and its role for me in
I was
wellness.
thinking.
Yeah. And so like the conversations I've had in the past, I just know like the 25-year-old Asena, much different from this age Asena, like where I would tend towards reactivity, like being able to be centered, helps me to really be present, listen, respond with clarity, with responsibility, like own the shit that I need to own as a professional or even like as a partner, as a sister, whatever. And that kind of presence helps people open up, communicates trust. People see you as someone who, can hold space for them.
Hmm.
And in high stress environments, like the environments we work in, we need that kind of we need to be able to protect our nervous system, be able to lead with compassion instead of urgency. And it helps to change the spaces. Like it has a ripple effect on everyone that we work with. And it has had a ripple effect on like the work that I do. I've seen it.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And it's also making me go back to, yeah, like, the pieces we are discussing about importance of friendships, of relationships, of community too, because, I've found, and I'm thinking about like when I was a dean and there would be like, a fight or, there'd be different things like happening all at once. There'd be a lockdown, right? And like having to figure out all these things and that
Mhm.
the more people that were like on my team that had that ability to, to kind of hold that inner stillness even when shit was going crazy, right? The more people that were around me that were able to do that, the easier it became for all of us to do that, right? Because if you feel like you're the only one that's like even trying to, practice that inner stillness while things are going wild, like it feels so heavy, you know.
Yeah.
But if you're like on a team and there's a lot of folks like, okay, we can figure this out, like, da 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 da, and you're kind of like, or if someone's struggling a little bit and you can kind of help them kind of, come back down to earth or vice versa, they can help you. Like, it's just,
Yep.
I'm just reminded of, yeah, the importance of like that interdependence and community
Yeah,
and
that is community care is what we even named it in our work is like not just self-care, but being tuned into your other folks and caring for them as well and helping to lighten their load, go for a walk, listen to them vent, whatever it is.
Mhm. Absolutely. And then the flip side in my mind of that too is just thinking about how these systems, you know, work implicitly and explicitly to make us feel isolated and alone and like and pull us apart from those relationships. Um,
100%.
Um, and in the vein of like, bridging and connecting, so I'm thinking about kind of spirituality, which is something, we've talked about a lot throughout the years we've known each other, and how it can be different than religion, for example.
Hmm.
Right. But this bridging of spirituality and social justice. And so some may view spirituality as kind of this personal journey that's separate from activism and policy work. I don't believe either of us do. All right, but yeah, but wondering, do you believe inner transformation, as Sadhguru describes, can directly contribute to organizational systemic change? If so, how?
Yes, 1,000%. Inner transformation directly impacts how systems change. That's no question. And for me, so spirituality and justice work all have always been connected. And so like our people didn't separate the two. Like our ancestors, they prayed and organized, they sang and they fought, and the resistance was both sacred and strategic.
Mm,
So when I think about the work I do now, I really see it as carrying that tradition forward. And so inner engineering reminds me that healing yourself actually makes you a more effective disruptor.
mm,
And yeah, so I'm not out here trying to prove myself through like grinding the hardest, but just leading from a place of clarity and love instead of fear and exhaustion.
mhm,
And that shift is that inner shift, has opened the door to just real like life transformation. Like the work is more sustainable. I'm not draining myself as I have in the past. And you can't build liberatory systems from places of unresolved trauma or internalized oppression. Like that energy shows up. People feel it. It affects everything and it reflects like how the decisions that are being made behind closed doors. And, I know that the time on this planet is a spiritual journey. And
mm,
it's about aligning with your soul, living your purpose, doing the work you're here to do. And then social justice work is spiritual work. Like we're trying to heal communities that are actively being harmed by systems that were never built with them in mind.
yeah,
And that's deeply spiritual, right? It's like it's bringing yourself back into center in spaces that systemically have done the opposite of that. And I think there is a line, you probably know it, Colin. I think it's Most Def, and he like talks about in one of his albums, he talks about like music being a reflection of the times we're living in.
oh yeah,
Is
yeah.
it is that Most Def?
That's Most Def. That was Black on Both Sides, track one,
He's talking,
hip
like
hop.
having a dialogue, right?
Yeah, and he says, if hip hop is smoked out, then that means we're smoked out. If hip hop is thriving, that means we're thriving, and how it's a reflection of just like how folks are doing.
Exactly. And that is the way that I think about justice workers too. Like we either reflect the same systems that we want to dismantle or we're interrupting them through how we show up and how we lead and leading with love.
Mm,
Or we're just, doing the same kind of like carceral habits, but we're just being nicer about it. Like
mm,
it just looks a little different.
yeah,
Uh, so yeah, so we can't expect our institutions and policies to do anything different if our insides are just replicating those harmful systems.
yeah, yeah. And it's making me think of something I've been trying to think a lot about lately, particularly as a relatively new parent. But just like being in education for so long is generational gaps. Right.
Mm,
Because, I think when we look to, some of our
Yeah.
incredible blood or non-blood related like ancestors who did, change work and, put their lives on the line, for oppressed peoples to be treated like human beings. I think we got a lot of models of like incredible brilliance, resilience, and also a lot of folks, working themselves to the bone, to death,
Hmm.
like without being able to rest and recover in the ways they needed and deserved. And but then also what I kind of noticed too, both within myself, my younger self, and then also in some of the younger adults or young people that, I work with, is they're being very good at, or my younger self being very good at like criticizing that, but then forgetting to acknowledge all the wisdom that our elders
Mm.
had or have, right? That, and being able to hold both of those things, right? And so I guess yeah, I'm wondering when you think about any of like your mentors or elders, what are kind of maybe even patterns that you've noticed of, places where you're like, um, you know, I've learned powerful lessons from these particular habits,
Mhm.
and then also like what are maybe some habits from older generations that you've noticed that maybe like it would be maybe better if we kind of, don't take those patterns on.
Oh my goodness. I think when I was preparing and just thinking about this book, one of my mentors pops into mind, and she is fierce. She's a creator. She's still like in the streets protesting, but she works too damn much. Just burnout, like not no self-care. Like there's just endless stories about her like working herself to the very bone, and I can see that reflected in her life. Just
Mm.
how that imbalance has impacted her
Yeah.
and her family. And I think about that habit, like, we look at like working hard and burning and going to the very last drop as something that is good, because if you're not going all the way, then then you're not even about it.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's a lesson that I've let go of. And then just like serving on my community board in Harlem, like there's so much history in the room, and folks are doing such great work, but in terms of like coalition building
Mm.
and like elevating young leadership, um, there is a gap.
Mm.
There is a gap that yeah, that I've observed. And so like doing more listening than talking to, I think is a newer habit, uh,
Definitely.
that I've carried with me, that I think I've observed my elders maybe not so much, just, you know.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and I know you know this, right? But because I've noticed really similar things, right, amongst others, and both on the, all the powerful things that we have and continue to learn from them, and also pieces where I'm like, I don't know if that particular piece is, hopeful.
Yeah,
And also want to say, and I know you agree with this, that there are elders who are just doing amazing things and
yeah,
aren't replicating some of those negative things as well. But I think on my end, one piece that I kind of am thinking about in this vein is I think specifically around um, my amazing mentors that are cis men, especially cis het men,
mm-hmm,
color, and just like um and many of them actually really modeling in beautiful ways, like trying to unlearn, pieces around rigidity, around like exerting, we were talking about control, right?
yeah,
And just like, and this need for it, right? And, or I wouldn't even say like a need for it, more like a fear of not having it, uh,
yeah,
being more kind of the reality and my grappling with that, right? And what that looks like and how that shows up for different
hmm,
ways at different times. And then thinking about, young, boys, young men, but also, unfortunately seeing this kind of resurgence of a lot of that really gross,
Mm,
uh, sexist, patriarchal, homophobic, transphobic, kind of bullshit kind of being revived in this arena, or this area of time
yeah.
amongst a lot of cis het boys and young men. And kind of wondering, like, as
Mm,
this, person, as this elder millennial in between, with Gen X and boomers and now Gen Z, um, it's kind of like what are the things that I need to be better about modeling, not only for
mm,
myself and, my family, my community's well-being, but like I'm thinking particularly like the boys and young men that I work with who are my students. But that ties into
mm,
ego, power,
mhm.
and leadership. And inner engineering suggests that transcending ego leads to true clarity and effective leadership. And so I'm wondering, from your experience in leadership training, I mean, any of your work, how can
Yeah.
professionals cultivate egoless leadership, or at least ego-conscious leadership, while still maintaining some semblance of authority and influence in their fields?
Well, letting go of ego is one of the hardest parts of leadership, especially when you're expected to have all the answers. So in my work, I've seen ego show up as like overworking, perfectionism, needing to prove your worth. But the leaders who actually shift culture and build trust, they're the ones that are grounded. They're not performing or posturing, but they lead with integrity and from wellness. And so I've been thinking a lot about wellness, especially in this time, and that it starts with basic care like rest, nourishment, reflection. Like today, I was able to really reflect on things instead of just being in meeting and spaces and responding.
Yeah.
Uh, and egoless leadership to me is responsible leadership. So it means like being present, being open to feedback, making space for others to lead, and it's restorative. So it's not like leading at people, it's not punitive, but it's leading with them. And it also requires like emotional honesty. And so, like, being able to sit with discomfort and
Mhm.
learning the lessons that come with discomfort. And yeah, like stepping into that discomfort. The kind of leadership, egoless leadership, also like you're sharing that you don't have all the answers. You're like thinking forward. You're not focusing on just what's broken, but what can be rebuilt. And to do egoless leadership well, you need strong boundaries.
Mm.
So strong boundaries helps you, you know, have stuff in your cup to pour from. And it can mean, like, especially in these times, being a steady presence, a mirror that reflects others' power, being
Mhm.
someone who's deeply listening to people and hearing them and letting you know that you see them and being really present in that listening. And this punitive mindset, I always think about it, and it's probably more of like a personal thing. I was raised in a very like punitive, I'd say punitive household. There was a balance. But too many of us were taught in leadership that leadership means punishment,
Yeah.
like yourself, of others, but that's ego. And
Yeah.
so when we lead from softness, then we help in dignity, like helping to preserve people's dignity, understanding, then we help interrupt that cycle. Um, and yeah, that has a ripple effect. And I think systems need to replicate that, like our justice systems, our education systems.
Mm. That's so beautiful. Um, Man, a number of things are popping into my head around the things you're speaking to. I remember, I think it was like Instagram maybe, but like I was seeing this like yin yang symbol, and like on one side, it said do no harm, and the other side said take no shit. And like right, and just like thinking about some of the things you were naming around,
Mm,
being an effective leader, right? Because I would say, those of us who are working, sincerely to the best of our ability, around our own healing, transformation, growth, maturity, development, right? Like even when we're at our best, right, are going to at times come into contact with people who are unable or unwilling, to do work like that. Right?
Yeah.
And so in those instances, right, like you have to, yeah, or just like I'm thinking about how difficult it can be to, to balance having compassion, for any human being, right, that is wounded and showing up as wounded, right? And then even thinking about myself in the past in ways that I showed up as wounded and could only see it in hindsight, right? Being
Yeah.
able to humanize, those experiences while also like, particularly if you are, in an organization of any kind, whether that's a job or like a people's party that's coming together to like organize around something, just like how, yeah, like how that tightrope walk can be so difficult, right?
Like,
And just like one of my mentors, Jeff, he talked about it years ago. It always stuck with me of just like, trying to have one foot, in kind of the arena of confidence, but not falling into or arrogance, and then on
hmm
the other side, one foot in like self-critique, right? But not falling into self-doubt, and how like it's like that balance, and how how easy it is to like fall one way or the other and not even realize it until you've already fallen, like where you're at.
yeah. I love that. I love that metaphor. I think when I'm thinking about what you're saying and like our younger selves, I mean, we make mistakes. I make mistakes still as my older self, but going back to the theme of like being in having really authentic friendships and relationships that are willing to give feedback, right? So if you're in deep community with folks, then people are feeling the impact of how you move, positive or negative, and they are coming to you with that feedback. And then
Mm,
you're shaped by the feedback that they give you. Like that is our community. The community that you and I share is a community of that, right?
absolutely.
It's like, damn, that was fucked up, or that made me feel kind of
Yeah,
um, and then giving people feedback. Like that feedback has grown me the most. And
yeah.
I seek that. Like I hunger for that. Um, and respond and adjust. I think there was an intern yesterday who was asking me about facilitation, and she was like, "How did you become a good facilitator?" Um, and I was remembering all the feedback I've gotten from being a facilitator and adjusting to all of that feedback, right?
Mm,
And so, like, really being a student of it, um, you really have to deeply care about who you're working with, and to give them feedback. If you're giving somebody feedback, it's just because you care about them. And
absolutely.
so, like, humanizing people and understanding how people show up. And I've had a challenging experience with supervisors in this past couple of years, and trying to have empathy and hold space for folks. It's really, really challenging.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, just being able to have conversations and ongoing feedback has helped us to navigate that relationship.
Hmm. Beautifully said. And I think the the thing too that I'll add is the feedback isn't always critical. All right, because I
Yeah.
remember there was a person I used to work with who was a younger educator, and they were doing their thing, and I was like, there was, as part of leadership team, I would observe different folks and, and um, look at some of the practices and like, are they aligning with the pieces that we're kind of talking about in our work and these things? And I was like, yo, and I told her, I was like, yo, can I check in with you later, to give you a little feedback? And, in the way she kind of came to me, it was assumed that the feedback was like negative or, or critical. Right. It
hmm
was actually, I was like glowing reviews. Like, my feedback is that like you're killing it in this way, this way, this way, and this way. But I was just like thinking too of the importance of like all the ways that like I'm thinking about just like in our friendship, like when, like good things come our way because we busted our ass to like, in a direction of some sort, right? That we just like, are overjoyed for each other and celebrate each other too, like in our victories as well. Right. So like
Yeah.
how important it is to, if something doesn't, feel right or, to check in with, with the folks that you love and care about, but also, because, but also that affirmative feedback too, like, guides you on your path is like also, right? And not just like within maybe this like, us talking about, our friendship in our community that we're tied to, but like in general, right? Like,
Yeah.
how human beings need both, to be told if and when you're maybe on a path that isn't necessarily helpful to yourself and or others, but
Yeah.
also where we, I would argue, need to hear like, yo, keep it up. That's
Yep.
clean. I really love
Yeah.
that. Mhm.
We need to do more of that. You're right. And I think that feedback is always an offering to someone else. Because feedback can be also people's stuff coming up, and you can receive that feedback. People can be emitting some of their trauma or whatever it is. And so feedback is an offering, and you have to, that's where that stillness and that grounding process comes in for you to be able to know, like, this feedback I will take, that feedback I will leave over there.
For sure. It's not verbatim, but it's kind of like Bruce Lee, like take the best and leave the rest.
Yes, take the best, leave the rest.
Well, and so this is kind of the last question before we start to close out with a couple of tiny questions. But when it comes to kind of practical application of inner engineering, if you were to recommend one core lesson from this book to those working in social justice and change work and education, policy work, any of these, arenas, what would it be, and how could they potentially implement it in their daily lives?
Yes, if there's one core lesson from inner engineering that I'd pass on, it's that your inner state shapes your outer impact.
Mm, yep.
And so many of us in this field, in these fields, we're constantly pouring into others, facilitating, listening, organizing, teaching. And if we're not grounded, then we start to be pulled in all those other directions. We get distracted, we lose our center. And so this book really reinforces that sustainable transformation has to start from within.
Mm,
And what that can look like is a whole lot of things. But I think that caring for yourself as much as you care for others. And so, like, how you show up for others and the grace and the humility you show for others, doing the work you do so well, you also need to have that compassion for yourself.
mm,
Uh, and alongside that is just building in moments to reconnect with yourself through the day, not bombarding your schedule, like giving yourself some grace between meetings, some time, pausing before responding to an email, or if something is triggering, sleeping on it, taking a night before you respond, taking time for yourself in the morning time, some quiet time. It
mm,
can be listening to music, cleaning, meal prepping, listening to a book, journaling. And then, yeah, all those little things, these little practices, like I've started this season to take hour-long walk breaks
ooh,
and just like
love it.
committing to it. And yeah, all those little things, and then also drinking water first
Mm.
thing in the morning is
Stay
not,
hydrated.
dude, like all those little things, they help you like stay centered. You're building those habit sites so you're not like just reacting or spiraling, but you're,
Mm,
being intentional and slowing down. And then you'll show up more different. You'll show up differently. You'll show up more present. Your folks are gonna feel it. You become more compassionate, more grounded. Everyone wins, and that energy has a ripple effect. So your inner state shapes your outer impact is the
mm.
lesson.
Oh, that's so gorgeous. I love it. And in my head, I was hearing Most Def sing, slow down, slow
Yes.
down. And that's also extra impressive because you live in fucking New York, and they say New York minute, everything's going like this out there.
Listen, and that hour walk, I'm like literally in Midtown, but
Mhm.
I like know where to walk to still
Yeah.
get that
Oh,
space.
wonderful. Man, well, as we begin to close out, thank you for all these wonderful reminders and
Yes,
sharing these lessons that you pulled.
you're welcome.
So we both are avid music lovers,
We
and
are.
Couple questions to end. First is what is a song, a musical artist, and or an album that you would pair with this book, Inner Engineering?
My goodness. Yes. So, song, and maybe you know which album this song comes from, but it's Redemption Song by Bob Marley. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. That is the book's thesis. And I don't know if that comes from Exodus. I'm not sure which Bob Marley album
Pretty
Redemption
sure
Song
it
comes
is
from.
Exodus, but I could be wrong. I
I'm
feel
gonna check it.
sure. Okay.
That's the one. We have to emancipate ourselves. Oh my goodness. Every day.
Love it. Love it. And then finally, and I'm so happy you brought Bob into the
Had
conversation.
to. We started with Bob. We got to end
Had to
with
do it.
Bob.
You feel
Bob has
me?
changed our lives.
Perfect. Uh, well, so yeah, finally, if you could, please complete the following sentence. People should read Inner Engineering by Sadhguru because dot dot dot.
Because we need the reminder that real freedom, personal, political, spiritual, starts from within.
Mm. Bing, 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 bing. I love it. Um, my powerful, amazing, brilliant friend, thank you so much for being a guest today. It's
My
been an honor
pleasure.
and a pleasure.
Love you.
Love you so much. And good people, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope that you have an incredible week ahead of yourselves, and we hope you enjoyed the flight. Peace.
Hey.